Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Today we've got an awesome guest, Gabija Toleikyte, who's a neuroscientist who does some pretty amazing work. She works across a broad range of areas. One of the areas that she works in is in business. She's doing some great stuff, and there's a lot of talks across the country and Europe, across the UK and in Europe, around neuroscience. Gabija, welcome to the show. Good to have you on board.
Hello, Jimmy. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Great to have you on board. So neuroscience, Gabija, there's people watching the show at the moment wondering what neuroscience is all about. Can you give people an insight into the world of neuroscience?
Oh, that's a very, very broad world to
Yeah.
So first of all, in my opinion, neuroscience gives very, very good insights into the deep mechanisms of human behavior. Now, we all are interested how to do things better in our life, how to deal with your emotions better, how to have better relationships, how to be more productive at work, how perhaps to communicate with your colleagues or with your partners or with your children better. And there's a lot of techniques out there which tips and tricks on how to do that, how to achieve your New Year's resolutions and things like that. But in my opinion, neuroscience explains both deep mechanisms, why certain things work and other things don't work, and by understanding that, we can make much, much better decisions in either of those areas.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. And neuroscience having the science base as well. What are some of the methods and mechanisms used in neuroscience, Gabija, to verify findings, to test hypotheses? How do neuroscientists go about testing a hypothesis, a theory? What are some of the processes they use to do that separates neuroscience from other protocols?
Yeah, well, that's a very, very good question. So first of all, in neuroscience, there was many different areas, and in those areas, different techniques are being used. So for example, in so-called cognitive neuroscience, the main tools being used are so-called brain imaging, because in cognitive neuroscience, we look at what areas of the brain are activated when we do different tasks. So that's one area. The areas I was mainly involved in were more circuitries and neurons and molecular neuroscience as well. And there, in those areas, we address the questions, for example, what has to happen in the neurons for us to form memories? What has to happen? What happens in the neurons when people get a Parkinson's disease? And
yes,
what are the mechanisms of all those potential diseases? And these are the questions I addressed in my own research. But overall, in general, like scientific method and neuroscience method is so that you design experiments so you want to really understand what's going on, what are the deep mechanisms of certain phenomena. And once you conduct the experiments, not only you need to have controls and have experiment group, and you have to see some differences between them, but also if you want to publish in peer-reviewed journals, other scientists all around the world have to challenge your studies and have to really make sure that these studies are done with a high rigor and can be reproduced by anyone else in the world if they conducted the experiment in exactly the same way.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating, and it sort of leads us on to the question. One of the questions I've got for you about, it's a deep question, a broad question. The question being, what exactly is reality when everyone's got their own unique perception of the world? And so we've got biological influences that make up a human being. So you've got a number of biological influences that make up someone's personality, potentially. You've got psychological influences around them as well. So the biological influence could be anywhere around genetic and their disposition to different environmental factors. You've got psychological influence that people around them, their experiences in life, social influences too, the people around them, the environment, a number of events. So, but what is reality, and how do we define reality? For me, every individual is as unique as a thumbprint, so to speak, in the sense that our perception of the world. So we have this intake of information, and then we process it And one of the things that I found, and sort of leading us to the question I've got for you about reality, and that's going to lead us on to how we can use this in business. One of the analogies I use, Gabby, is that it's like you've got like an orchestra. Let's say you've got a conductor and an orchestra, and you've got everyone playing a variety of different instruments, be it violin, be it one thing or the other, cello, and you've got an orchestra. And I see the prefrontal cortex almost like the conductor. And the more developed the prefrontal cortex is, and the more processing power we've got, the better that we can fine tune the instruments to produce music. So goal-directed behavior for me is instrumental in moving forward in life, whether that goal be broken down to segments, whether it be broken down daily or weekly. What's your take on reality? How do you define each individual experience?
Well, first of all, there is different stages in each of us forming our model of the world and our reality. First stage is perception. And at this stage already, everybody perceives the world very, very differently. That's related to my first research project I've done, maybe 10 years ago, actually, during my undergrad, which was with the area called thalamus. What happens, the brain area thalamus is quite deep in the brain. It belongs to the mammalian complex. And all the senses of your body, eyes, ears, taste buds, skin receptors, firstly send the information to the thalamus, distributed anywhere around the brain where the information is being processed later. So thalamus is the first brain area to get that information. And for many years, it was thought that thalamus is just a passive relay system, like if you like Royal Mail. You send a letter, Royal Mail takes it and delivers it to where it's needed. What we learned, what thalamus does, and let's use the metaphor further with the Royal Mail, it takes the letter, it opens it, it reads through, and if it's not important, it dashes it. It trashes it, and it doesn't send it further. However, if it's very important, it amplifies and multiplies the copies and sends information, really amplified into the other areas. So actually, thalamus is not a passive structure. So when we perceive the world, it's already actually pre-filtered at subconscious level. Now, very, very interestingly, the most exciting fact for me about that is that it's not quite passive how thalamus does that. Your neocortex, or the surface around your brain. Actually, I can just show you the picture. This is from my book stand, actually. So neocortex is the wrinkly bit on the outside, and thalamus is somewhere just deep in there, which we can't quite. So what happens? The neocortex, especially, for example, here's the visual part of neocortex. It sends information to thalamus. So, for example, if you're feeling happy and you go to the street, neocortex kind of sends information, okay, I'm happy, world is a good place, search for more happiness out there. And thalamus pre-filters information, and we notice, suddenly, have you ever, for example, let's take when we're in love. When we're in love, we're happy, we go to the streets, everybody seems to be, happy, the world seems to be an amazing place. Now, if when we get depressed, we suddenly go to exactly the same street. There's perhaps similar things going on, but we notice all the lonely people, all the unhappy people, all the misery around. And that's because neocortex is sending a different task to thalamus, different things to search for. So thalamus, in fact, and by the way, neocortex has 10 times more connections as opposed to fronthalamus to neocortex. So that controller, our neocortex, seems to really kind of keep asking thalamus to do specific tasks. And a lot of those tasks actually are determined by our past experiences, our belief systems, and our expectations. It becomes a bit of a vicious cycle, because if we experienced a lot of pain in the past, our neocortex would be way more sensitive to that and sending information to thalamus to search for more pain. As a result, we keep thinking the world is a very painful and hard place. So it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle, and that's why certain our past experiences tend to tend to produce more and more similar experiences in future. So that's just one main stage, in my opinion, of the reality, which already shows every single person perceives the world differently. Now, using those facts, we create this certain model of the world. What is it like being human? What is it like being male? What is it like being female? What is it like living in London? What is it like being mother or father? What is it like, being a boss in the organization? And we have all sorts of beliefs around that.
Cool.
And that's and every single person has a very, very different model built. It's not obvious, and actually, unfortunately, our brain automatically thinks that everybody else is the same as I am, which is, very important to realize that's never true, because a lot of times that's what leads to all sorts of misunderstandings, communication issues, and implied things which never don't get double checked. And very, very important is to really, really figure out, what's my model of the world? Does this person have similar ideas about those points, important points? And if not, perhaps I can learn something else, other person's reality, because once only together discussing those things, we could get more objective view, because every single person's model of the world is absolutely subjective.
Yeah, and there's a confirmation bias with people who they tend to reaffirm their belief system. So certainly people feel more comfortable around people they're comfortable around. So for example, the brain likes familiarity. So we see confirmation bias on social media is quite imminent, where research suggests that if someone doesn't like a post within 2.5 seconds, they won't like it at all. And the post they do like generally supports their view of reality. Whatever reality is up to the individual. So it's fascinating stuff. I think that sort of goes to memory. And you made a point about memory. Now, neurogenesis for me, and there were, in years gone by, Gabija, neuroscientists, at least a lot of leading neuroscientists, used to think that that was it, the brain. We weren't malleable after a certain point, or at least we were far more malleable early on in life, and then that malleability became stunted or less likely. We know now adults have a malleable brain, but they've got to work hard at change. And that's my theory around people who, you see people who, they look for outside extrinsic sources of motivation. They look for change. And for me, just like eating nutrition, just like doing exercise, you need to keep at it. And the brain's malleability depends a lot on the work you put into it. You don't eat one nutritious meal and you're fit for life. You don't do one training session. There's a misconception about the brain where people tend to think, well, you know what, I'll do a meditation, I'll do some affirmations, incantations, I'll do a technique, and I'm on the way. So I think a lot depends on the person's will. But what's interesting about memory, and for people watching now, and I'm sort of going to get your take on it in a moment. So let's say people watching, they've been on a holiday a year ago. Now, a day after the holiday or during the holiday, they can associate the experiences a lot more vividly, a lot more rich than what they would do a year later, or 2 years later, or 5 years later. So the event that happened, let's say they went away on holiday. Imagine for a moment a holiday a year ago. A day after that holiday, the richness of the experience is far more associative to fragmented than what it would be now. Now, we know that the hippocampus and memory, we know the role hippocampus's memory plays. Now, is it possible to, you mentioned about the past having a big influence in the future. So we talk about schemas and associations, experiences, like say, if you took 3 people who were walking in a field and one and they all had an experience to a certain type of dog, and one was bitten by the dog at 5-year-old, and one had a dog like that was loving, and one had no association to it, their experience would be all unique. So the person who was bitten would be more likely to be afraid of the dog. The one who had a loving dog would be more likely to be, go across and stroke the dog. The one that was no experience to it would, what's all the fuss about? Now, they could all argue the dog is dangerous, but ultimately, who's right, who's wrong in terms of reality? So there's no right or wrong. It's just a question of the person's perception. But for me, neuroscience is quite instrumental in adaptive behavior, where we can, okay, we decide on an outcome. I want to be more adaptive. I want to be more social. I want to be more functional at work. I want to be more functional at life in general. Yet these underlying belief systems, these schemes that people have from years ago, what can people do? I mean, how do we recall memories, Gabija, from your point of view, a scientific point of view? How do we draw on these memories, and can we always trust our memories?
Yeah, very good question. So I see a few questions within what you're mentioning. First of all, is our memory reliable? And how do we form memories? And do memories change over time? And can we change the old memories? That's one part of the story. And second part of the story, can we improve our memory? Can we keep on memorizing things which are important? So in the first part of the story, thing is that our memory as well is not such a reliable source of information. But the reason being that the brain's function of memory is not to remember everything what's around us. The brain needs to remember all the information which could help you to survive better. And as a result, brain a lot of times remembers painful events much stronger than the pleasant events. Or if events do not have any emotional component to it, if the event didn't cause you any neither pain or pleasure, a lot of times those memories are weaker. And the reason being that for us, for survival as any other animals, it's much more important to avoid pain than to seek pleasure. And if something doesn't give you any emotions, then it means it's not that important, because brain marks the meaning of the events in the language of emotions in a very, very primitive, actually, brain regions within mammalian brain complex. These regions are very, very important, actually. Now, our memories keep changing over time based on further experiences. And the reason being that each memory is not, there isn't such a thing as a kind of, like a box of memories in your brain. Each memory is represented in the brain via the strength of the connections between different neurons. So we call that via the strength of different synapses. And that keeps changing. So for example, if I read a poem once, I form a new network, or actually a number of networks to represent that poem. If I read it second time, the connections between those neurons in that network become stronger. And the more times I read, the stronger and stronger and stronger connections become, till I can recall it without even looking at it. And that's when we form a stable network for it. Over time, certain networks become weaker or even disappear, and other networks become so strong that we can call them brain highways, because they're kind of by default, like they're triggered. And these brain highways are really, really strong networks, determine our personality, our general look on the world, our skills we can do, our emotional, most dominant emotional state. And the same is with memories, that we have certain in the past, a lot of things happened. But some of the events, we say, oh, my childhood was like this. And that's just very small part of the story. So we remember only small fraction of what actually happened. And those memories over time might even change. And the process of memories changing is called memory reconsolidation. I touched a little bit of that during my PhD at UCL. And memory reconsolidation is a very, very fascinating process. It's been used a lot with actually soldiers who come back after war, who had very, very many traumatic memories. And the way to change memories is, first of all, we need to trigger something. We need to send a trigger to which triggered painful event without the painful event happening. So let's imagine I come to the office and my boss shouts at me, and I feel upset. And the more times it happens, the more of the kind of painful memories accumulate, attached to the office. Now, if the boss leaves and there is a new boss who is really loving and caring and supportive, then I come to the office, and suddenly the office is the same trigger, the same location, but suddenly either there is mutual stimuli, so no boss, or it's really compassionate and caring person who asks, how are you? How is it going? Can I help you anyhow? You've been doing great yesterday, right? And suddenly the same place starts to accumulate different memories attached to it. And bit by bit, my kind of painful memories of coming into the office gets overridden.
Of course, yeah.
And the most important thing though is to keep on actually to override the memories. We can't just get rid of memories. So another example, perhaps better to illustrate that. Imagine if you're given a talk, Jimmy. Has it ever happened to you, given a talk and it didn't go as well as you liked?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely the story of my life.
Imagine you're given a talk and it kind of went not so good, right? And imagine if that moment you made a decision. I'm not a good speaker. I'll never ever give a talk again.
No, for sure.
Right? What happens that memory becomes a dominant memory associated with public speaking. And whenever you think of public speaking, you'll be paralyzed with fear. Now, if at that moment you make a decision that, okay, this time it didn't go very well, but next time I'll practice much more. I'll take the feedback of existing attendees of what could I do better in future, and perhaps instead of practicing once, I'll practice 10 times. And that time it goes much better. And you do 100 talks, which go much better afterwards. Suddenly, that memory is no longer valid, is no longer important, that painful memory. So the way to override painful memories is actually healing experiences. And I notice with my coaching clients, in terms of when they need to overcome kind of traumas related to certain jobs or certain relationships or certain things they are scared of, is using memory reconsolidation. It's meaning doing the thing with much more support, in a much safer environment, that they actually can override that memory, that the same triggers actually neutral or pleasant memories instead.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think that you've made some fascinating points there. And I'm sure it's really insightful for people watching and who watch, and they can watch it again as often as they want to pick up as much as they can do. Now, you make an important point there. Now, if we sort of go back to primal times, and so one of the functions of the amygdala is to recognize danger, threat. We don't have dinosaurs anymore, not at least in most town centers anyway. But we don't have the same danger we used to have all those years ago. Yet the brain's capacity to differentiate between primal danger, like, for example, dinosaurs, tribe, and so on and so forth, being outcast from the confirmation bias, the link to being outcast from the tribe, you couldn't survive on your own. It'd be hard to survive on your own. So these days people look to and whether you be in a funding institution, whether it's in business, whether it's in life in general, you see people tend to group together. We see it in demographic around migration. Now, I come from a migrant family myself, but we see it in demographic around migration. People tend to associate with people who have the same values and beliefs that they are. They feel more comfortable, very much that familiarity. Now, these days we don't have the danger that we had then, but the perceived danger is a poorly designed. Now, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It is what it is. We've got what I would say poorly designed. The design of the modern world is not conducive to the primal brain, where we're constantly under this threat activation, for want of a better word. So an email could induce threat. A text could induce threat. Running late to work could induce threat. Something's going to be taken away. And then we can run a hypothesis of the worst case scenario. We could magnify it. We could emotional reason. This means this. I feel that. And he didn't look at me, or she didn't look at me the right way. So all these things. So we've got this capacity from that point of view to recognize danger. But the danger that we're recognizing isn't always going to materialize. Give me the strength to control. I can let go. I can't. So for me, it's sort of integrating techniques that can help people to be able to function better. Now, we know if you're having a bad day, if you're feeling bad about yourself, you're going to emotion has a link to behavior, our thoughts, emotion, behavior. So if things are going well and we're feeling well, we're going to respond better than when we're not feeling great. So if you hear there's redundancies being in the workplace happening, and you're in a bad place emotionally, your reaction is going to be less adaptive to if you're in a great place. So you're feeling good about yourself, then your reaction is going to be better than what it would be if, for example, you're under pressure, and so on and so forth. So for me, it's about giving people the tools and techniques to empower themselves and to be more productive, to live a better life as well, to have a more functional, adaptive life. Now, with that, there's a couple of questions that I have for you, which I think are really important. The first being is how we, and you sort of touched on how we form a model of the world, and also, can personality be changed? There's obviously a big debate amongst the field of psychology. Can we change, or can personality be changed?
Yeah. But just to quickly answer that bit, is kind of nicely goes on to what I mentioned before about neural networks. So in short, yes, we can change those brain highways. However, it's not easy. Because as we visited at the beginning, the kind of those predominant highways keep determining what things we pick out in the environment. And as a result, we keep on reinforcing that. So it requires quite a lot of work to change the certain personality traits. And we need to start. So for example, if somebody is constantly noticing negative things, so a more pessimistic trait, that's a very small aspect of personality. And then each day for them actually asking, what's good in my life? And writing down the list, 20 things, 10 things, as many as you can. And then at the end of the day, asking yourself, what good happened to me today? What things went well? And not asking actually the second bit, or what things didn't go well. Because those networks are already very, very strong. But we want to develop the networks which notice the good things happening in the world and the successes, personal successes throughout the day. So that's a just quick, short, exercise if you want to work on becoming more optimistic as you like.
Good, yeah, no, really good.
Yeah, but then if we talk about now, there is other kind of a bit more complicated mechanisms, as you mentioned, in terms of more primitive brain areas, in particular brain area called amygdala. So we just in brief, the brain can be actually distributed in one of the models called the True model by Paul MacLean. There's a few different models, but this is just the one I find quite quickly usable, which says that the most primitive brain areas we can group into the lizard brain, and this is the continuation of brainstem, and this which enable us to breathe, to digest food, for our heart to beat. So it's kind of basic life functions. Now, other areas there in the middle, we can group them into mammalian brain complex, which is, as name implies, all the mammals have very analogous, very similar brain areas. And the function of those areas is to seek pleasure and avoid dangers. And the way mammalian brain complex talks to us is in the language of emotions. And the most developed brain area called neocortex, or the human brain, most mammals actually have really thin layer of it, and humans have enormous neocortex. Now, very important thing what happens is when there is a car crash, or if somebody criticizes you, the first and the quickest areas to react are mammal brain. Not the smartest areas, because neocortex works much slower and requires much more energy. It can do much more complicated computations, and it can understand the modern world much better. Now, mammal brain, if we look at it like a 4-year-old child, it gets scared very easily. Like if you have a 4-year-old child and it gets lost in the supermarket, it's going to be devastated. It's going to think that it's going to die. Now, when we have adult getting lost in the supermarket, we know it's not a disaster, and we can ask the way out. Now mammal brain reacts to all those things, potential dangers, very quickly and very strongly. And if we wait a little bit and give neocortex to assess situation, we'll much better know it's not the end of the world. But most importantly, actually, when amygdala is very, very active in the moments when we are really mad at someone, when we are really anxious, or if we are really jealous. Amygdala actually can hijack the very front part of neocortex, which is just there, called prefrontal cortex, temporarily. For a short period of time, your prefrontal cortex doesn't work very well. And as a result, we kind of say things we don't mean. We sometimes do things we regret afterwards in the in the heat of the argument, for example. Like, I mean, in my talks, I always ask, who of you have said or done something in such a state, you regret it, and nearly everyone lifts their hands up. So very important to realize that your brain will immediately judge the situation based on mammal brain quicker. Now, if in the moment you're overwhelmed with emotions, wait 20 minutes. Usually it takes about 20 minutes for your neocortex, for prefrontal cortex to get back online. And after that, ask yourself questions to stimulate your neocortex or human brain thinking. So for example, how important is that? What's the worst that could happen?
Yes, that's really good.
Is there any opposite evidence? For example, when we give talks, right? There is almost for me, like in London for Funzing, I give talks usually anything from 100 to 250 people, and inevitably there will be at least one person who doesn't like my talk. My experience, in every talk there is at least one person, or actually usually there is one person.
Yeah,
right?
There's always one.
Right? And
yeah.
Initially, when I see like a negative, feedback, of course my amygdala kicks in every single time. It says like, oh no, But then I think about it and I say, okay, it was like, for example, 2 weeks ago I delivered talk for 256 people. It was one person, and initially I was like, oh. But then I was like, okay, so how many people actually like the talk, right? So most likely, at least over 200 people. So I was like, okay, actually, and why rational thinking and doing this exercise daily? I would suggest to every time your amygdala is active, we need to educate amygdala, because amygdala is like a little scared child. We need to comfort, say, okay, that's fine. It's very, very normal to freak out by that. But what's the reality? We need to search for the opposite.
Yeah.
Right?
Precisely, and that's really, really important. So you've got this tennis match going on between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And so let's say, for example, for anyone watching, let's say, for example, if they went to bed tonight and they had a big bang in the kitchen, so the first reaction would be the amygdala response, and they might think someone's breaking in. And then as they make their way down to the kitchen, there's that tennis match going on. Well, it could be the dishes that are left hanging over the edge. Then they carry on walking down. You've got like this tennis match bouncing. They see eventually they see the dishes on the floor, and the limbic and the prefrontal cortex come into agreement and say, you know what, it's okay, I'm safe. But obviously there's that rush of adrenaline and cortisol in the system that's going to be around for the next potentially 4 or 5 hours or so. I have a system that I use, Gabby, with some of the people I work with in like leaders and politicians and football managers. I say to them, before you answer a question, take a drink. It's not vodka, by the way, a drink of water, to buy 6 seconds exactly. So they're not emotionally hijacked. So before they answer the question, at least buy 6 seconds between that subconscious automatic thought response to a more calculated response. And in an ideal world, if we could sort of shift all our problems to the frontal part of the brain, we'd be on the way. The issue is we don't live in an ideal world, and we're very Pavlovian. I don't know if you're aware of the Stanford experiments, where in the 60s they, because of time, I won't get too much detail, they're going to email me, and I'm sure there's people out there know more about it than me, but my understanding is that the Stanford experiments involved a group of children around 5 or 6 years of age, and they were given the option to have one, I think it was a chocolate biscuit or marshmallow now, or have 2 later. And and there's an irony there where, if my memory serves me correct, it's been a long time since I read about the study, and I had to prepare a dissertation around, well, that was one of the articles I cited, or one of the dissertations I wrote, but they suggested that some of the observations, the young people that did better, had better impulse control. As a general rule, the ones who could control their impulse more would do better in life. We know the teenage brain is obviously still developing up until 22 years of age or so, but ultimately in the end, it did demonstrate that the ones who could, and that in business is the same. I think that we could not respond to the email, not respond to the text, not respond to that bad criticism, we're in a much better place to be more adaptive and functional. But yeah, so your take on impulse control, and you talked about the Pavlovian, and human beings are quite Pavlovian, and when they did experiments in the 20s, you had the little Albert experiment. It was a pseudium that they used, and we've had many since then, and albeit ethical guidelines wouldn't allow to experiment these days, but what they did, they got like a tame white rat, and they put little Albert in a room, and they tested him for any other phobic, or any other fears. He didn't have any of that, and so he didn't have any fears or phobias from 9 months to 11 months, but then they brought a tame white rat and placed it on his lap, and they would then use a hammer behind him and make a loud noise to see if there's an association building. Eventually what he would do, he was afraid of not just the rat, any fluffy toy. So sort of we move forward in the world that we live in today, and we wouldn't have ethical guidelines to an experiment like that these days. But these days, you take into consideration that implicit response that we have. We start building these networks everywhere, and you can see why anxiety is, and not put anxiety just down to people's perception of reality, but we can see how people become far less functional. There's so much out there. You know, an email can trigger a response, a text can trigger a response, a deadline can trigger a response, and helping people get to a more productive state of mind is instrumental, really. And I think I'm going to put something out there to you. The world we live in today, now this is great. We've got modern technology. We can do an interview where, you know, across the other side of the world, and people around the world can watch it. So social media, so using technology is meant to make our life easier, but it's making a lot of people's lives more challenging because people are trying to multitask, and the concentration spans, according to research, is getting less and less. So what can people do to be more productive and get the job done? I have a saying, Gabby, if you want something done, ask a busy person. You've got more chance of getting it done. So productivity is a big struggle in the world we live in today, and I think that some of it's down to people's more distractions out there. So rather than using some of these things for a good thing, they're starting to just use it to distract themselves from the reality that they're in. But your take on, can we train ourselves to our attention span? Can we multitask? Can the brain, and how much can the brain multitask without doing things as well as we could do?
Yeah, so very, very good observation. So first of all, starting with the willpower, which you mentioned in the marshmallow test, done quite a few years ago and reproduced multiple times in different forms, is mainly measures how long can we actually delay gratification, how long can we delay reward. In order to be able to do that, we need the very, very front part of the brain called prefrontal cortex. Now, we know in children, prefrontal cortex is not very well developed. So for them, it's really, really hard to do that. As for adults, actually, it's much, much easier. Now, for either age, depends on what you do, either makes your prefrontal cortex stronger to delay the reward, or it makes it weaker. So for example, every time your child wants a candy, if it has access to candies, then it doesn't train the willpower. Every time it wants a reward, it gets reward immediately. For adults, there is no exception. Every time we are bored and we want a bit of a dopamine kick, we take a phone, we play a computer game on the phone, we check the social media, we get the hit of social media. The best way of getting dopamine, or the substance in the brain called neurotransmitter, which creates a pleasure or reward, is kind of, you know, doing something what is not quite certain what's going on. And social media is perfect, you know, like it has uncertainty and has both like a lot of things which trigger pleasure centers happening. So that's why many people get quite addicted, actually, and or even literally addicted to their phones, to the social media. And that's why, you know, we often see couples, families, friends in the cafes on their phones, because that gives a very quick, immediate reward. So first of all, if you want to train your willpower, which in the long run, and most of achievements require sustained attention and delayed gratification. So for example, when I was doing my PhD, like PhD took 4 years and the reward was 4 years later. So imagine, and most of my experiments, over 90% of my experiments didn't really produce results. So imagine doing 10-hour experiment, really tricky experiment every single day, and 90% of the times that not working. So if I didn't quite train my prefrontal cortex to have good willpower beforehand, there was no way I would have been able to put up with it. And that's why in children, in order for them to do well at school, it's no miracle. They need to, postpone the desire to play, the desire to do other things, and really focus on what's going on in the class. They need to put the work needed in order to learn the material, and not always is fun. Most of the time, the kids, they enjoy learning the things they want to learn, but there's a lot of things they don't want to learn. And what we call academic success, a lot of times, we look at the kind of average, achievements over multiple subjects. So for that, willpower is crucial. Now, if you want to train your willpower, there's many things you can do. First of all, for training attention. Now, if you noticed, perhaps majority of us, and my guess is, either of you watching, not an exception, our attention span is getting shorter and shorter and shorter over time. And we can notice that, by the way. Remember, when we were kids, we used to read huge books and sit down in one sitting and read, sometimes for hours. And now if you want to read one chapter or a newspaper or a magazine, that already, sometimes, we start reading, check the phone, make a cup of coffee, keep doing multiple things. So, if you want to train your attention, there's a few things you can do. So first of all, if we look, I always like, before giving any advices, I like looking in the brain mechanisms. In the brain, there is 2 different attention systems. They are connected with one another, and they're kind of competing with one another. One is called dorsal attention system or goal-driven attention system. That's, for example, if right now I want to book the flights, and if there's a lot happening around me, I have to filter out that noise of the environment in order to focus and book the flights, or in order to focus and keep the conversation with you. And that's goal-driven or dorsal attention system. Now there's another attention system called ventral attention system or stimuli-driven attention system. And that system is required for when you go to the street to notice what's happening on the street. You're in the forest to notice how, the beauty of the trees, the birds singing, the fresh air. So we're using different systems. Now, have you ever noticed, Jimmy, that when you're really, really in your head, when you're thinking about something, perhaps you're planning your next seminar, perhaps you're still involved in thinking about the session with the client you just had, you walk home and you don't even realize how you get home. You don't notice what was happening around you. Maybe you went shopping in the shop and you don't even notice who served you in the shop. So that's because when we activate very strongly dorsal attention system, the ventral attention system is not as active. So we don't notice things further. And the other way around applies. If we're constantly just wandering around, we might forget, like if you go to the shop and you're just noticing everything around, you might even forget where you're going, why you're going there. So those systems are competing. So very, very important to figure out which of those systems do you want to train. Is your problem that you're too much goal-focused and have too much attention on those tasks you need to complete, and then you're having conversation with a person and you have no clue what the person is saying, and you struggle to form a deep connection? Then you might need to train your ventral attention system. For that, mindfulness practices are a very, very good way to go about. And there's many different forms of mindfulness practices, but most of them are to notice things and observe things which are happening around you and be there with no agenda. Now, if you struggle with the first system, if you sit down to do work and suddenly everything is distracting around you, you can hear the colleagues loud, your phone is distracting you, then you might need to train your dorsal attention system. To do that, one of the best techniques I know is called the Pomodoro Technique. And that technique can be modified as you like, but the whole idea is that you decide how long you're going to do certain tasks, and it could be any duration, but you decide how long. So let's say I'm going to be journaling for 15 minutes with no distractions, as actually I did just before our call. And I set my timer for 15 minutes, and for those 15 minutes, I can do nothing else, just type on my computer. I can't open my emails, and my phone is on silence. I can't go and make a cup of coffee. For those 15 minutes, I can only do that. Once the timer rings, the time is up, then I have, let's say, 5 minutes break. In 5 minutes break, I can do whatever I like. I can make myself coffee. I could chat to the friend on the phone. I could check my emails. I could go on social media. It doesn't matter. Once the 5 minutes are up, I do again 15 minutes of, let's imagine I keep typing. I use this technique to write my PhD thesis, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I used a bit different formula. To start with, I was using 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. But later on, as I kind of trained attention and I worked the time up, I used 45 minutes, 15 minutes, 45 minutes. And
okay.
So you can adjust accordingly. You can even, if somebody is really, really struggling to keep focus, to keep attention, you can even start with 5 minutes. Uninterrupted time to do specific tasks. For 5 minutes, you do that task. After that, for 5 minutes, you can do whatever you like, again for 5 minutes. And that already keeps making your dorsal attention system stronger and stronger over time. And those networks are becoming more pronounced, and that over time will become more default state. Now, very important is to realize a realistic expectation. You can't do that whole day long. So so the interval of working and the break is called 1 Pomodoro. So have a goal for yourself, do 4 Pomodoros a day, or 2 Pomodoros a day, or even 1 Pomodoro a day, right? But most important is to do that daily, if possible, or at least on the working days.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. I think that's important. You mentioned mindfulness now. Mindfulness is like the buzzword these days, and we hear, and I'm a big fan of mindfulness. I think it's got its place, and I certainly utilize it as well. Certainly that's useful. And I think that what you said there is really important, because you start on a level that you can work with. So you might be comfortable doing 45 minutes. Someone else might be comfortable doing 10, and they can sort of benchmark the level that they're comfortable working with and just expand that and measure productivity. A couple of things I was going to touch on there is my findings in business is that a lot of the, in business, there tends to be a focus on external attribution in terms of how we're driven and drive people. So you'll find that from a psychological perspective, things like KPIs, key performance indicators are used, and the way we measure performance generally works. The way any business is going to be measured from a point of view of performance is baseline profit, one would think, and then you've got the KPIs that are developed at the back end of that, key performance indicators. Now, we know to motivate someone, any external source is going to have its limitations.
Yeah.
It has to come from within. So for me, shifting to internal attribution, getting people to be more self-aware, mindfulness was great for that, because you become more self-aware, because we know a great member of staff is going to be motivated, enthusiastic. If you've got a member of staff going into work that's highly motivated, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high 8s, they're enthusiastic, they've got gratitude for the customer, they're going to be far more functional, all things being equal, than the one who is less motivated, less enthusiastic, and less grateful for having the job. So if we can then develop a system around internal attribution in adverse to KPI, which is useful, we need to know where we are on the table, just like a golfer needs to know what score they've got, a football table. In school, we need to get an idea of where we are in university. For me, if we can sort of give ownership and develop experiential exercise for people to be able to be more motivated, more enthusiastic, and teach them some skills, mindfulness is useful for doing that. The only thing I would say with mindfulness is that how we make the transition, Gabija, from a concept that's got thousands of years ago to the modern world. Now, I think for me, the realism that how we incorporate these techniques, and people sometimes get frustrated because they struggle to do the process, and they won't do it at all. If we can adapt it to the society that we're in now, because 2000 or how many thousands of years ago some of these concepts were in existence or formulated, the world was more a different place than what it is today. And certainly we didn't have the impact of the Industrial Revolution, where you've got to be at a certain place at 9, certain place at 12, certain place at 1. And I think what you said is important, setting time frames and outcome-driven performance, but also then reverting back to the individual and giving them tools to be more motivated, giving them tools to be more enthusiastic, giving them tools to be more calmer, more tranquil, feel better about themselves are quite useful. So tweaking some of these tools and techniques for the modern world for me is imperative. And some of the ways of doing that is, like you mentioned, the Pomodoro Technique. We can use mindfulness, and we can take a bit here and a bit there and a bit here, and we can collectively then produce better outcomes. Because I believe if you're functioning well, the KPI will look after itself. If there's a market for your product and you're functioning well, you're going to work motivated, enthusiastic, focused, and you feel good about yourself, you're going to be a better salesperson, you're going to be better at any functional task that you would do otherwise. So from that point of view, as we sort of start drawing towards a close, just a couple of things I'm going to fire over at you. The big one is these days is people talk about, I think you can't go through a day without seeing a video about someone offering an input or some sort of advice on procrastinating. My take on procrastinating is it doesn't exist, Gabija. I think that we're always concentrating on something. I think procrastinating is not concentrating what you want to concentrate on that time. Because whether you're sitting down in front of TV watching a soap, you're still doing something. But procrastination for me is doing one thing and thinking you should do something else. Yeah. So if you've got a PhD to do and these research projects to get on with, if you're watching TV, if you're going bowling, if you're going for a walk down the street, in your mind you're thinking, I should be doing this, in adverse to doing that. So for me, sort of guiding people, and one of the things I use for me with anybody with many different issues, whether it's procrastinating, anxiety, whatever it might be, is turning the word into a verb. We tend to use nouns to describe ourselves, and they become a self-fulfilling prophecy, an aspect of identity. So if I say, so people and who come to me with variable issues, I can tweak that word. So how are you procrastinating? How are you doing anxiety? In adverse to, and what makes you anxious? So in adverse to, I'm an anxious person, we know a noun being a person, place, thing is redundant. We'll label ourselves a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we can tweak that into how are you anxieting, all things being well, we get a map of the person's experience. So how are you procrastinating? And we get a map of their reality, what they see, what they hear, what they feel. We can get a map of their reality, as close as we can get a model of their representation of reality, where they are, that we can set an outcome where they want to be. And I certainly think in the world of procrastinating, one of the questions I ask people I work with is, how are you procrastinating? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? And what do you want to do? So we can sort of bridge that gap. And that's sort of in loose terms, a lot more to it than that. They'll give you an idea of my take on it. But from your point of view, you're a high achiever. You're traveling the world, you do a lot of things, and you've done a lot. And one could say, well, Gabby's a high achiever. Give her a task to do, she'll get it done. Gabby's got high processing power in brain functionality because she can do research quite easily. Now, we know there's a spectrum between one person and another, and that may be biological, it may be psychological, it may be sociological, but we know, and I'm not sure if you know the Phineas Gage story between Phineas, okay, so we're running out of time, but for people watching, so cutting a long story short, however many years ago it was now, I think it was in the 19th century now, quite loosely, and he has an accident at work, and the accident he has at work, I think it was gunpowder went off on the railroad and damaged his prefrontal cortex. Now, what I find amazing and fascinating was that, okay, his functionality was limited. People suggested or implied his personality changed almost overnight. He became erratic. Apparently, he became a different person, the person he was a day before the brain damage. But what I find quite amazing for me, Gabby, was the fact that he could still, it was still functional to the point that my understanding is he would then go off and he wouldn't work in that environment no more, but he tried his hand at many other things. So it shows, okay, he had parts of his frontal lobe damaged or at least missing anyway, but he could still be functional to the point that he moved, from my understanding, to a different state in America, which requires processing power. He then put himself on display, I think in a museum or something along them lines. So it shows he still had some functionality, which is quite amazing how malleable the brain is, that one part of the brain can bounce off the other. Many people say, well, they focus on what he lost the ability to do, but I think what he could still do. So what I find fascinating in that respect, and the reason I use that story, was there's people out there, okay, they might be thinking, well, okay, you know, Gabby's a high achiever, give her a task, she can get it done, or there's high achievers out there, the limitations of self. So from your point of view, can we all achieve the same? Can we all change behavior? Can we all become high achievers? Is it possible really for all of us to go on and be what we want to be?
Yeah, it's quite interesting that, you know, you shared a few different stories, and I can see them linking nicely. So first of all, every single one of us has a very unique hierarchy of values. And if you want to figure out yours, there is a questionnaire on the internet you can find, Dr. John DeMartini Value Questionnaire, where you are answering those questions. You'd really figure out what things you truly value, what things you're truly interested in. And the main difference is that the things we truly value, we can't wait to do it. We always find time for it. We always find money for it. We never procrastinate over it. And so once we know our value, top priorities, in those things we function very, very differently, as opposed to the things which are at the bottom of the list. So for example, I have really high value in delivering seminars and in delivering new products, new neuroscience related products. So there hasn't been a day when I procrastinated preparing the slides. There hasn't been a day when I procrastinated, you know, delivering a talk. Like when you asked me to talk about neuroscience on the air today, right? I was like, absolutely, you know, why not? But there are some things which are at the bottom of my list. And let me think what those things might be, is politics, for example, and current affairs. If you ask me when is the last time I watched news or read newspapers, you know, like if I felt dogmatized that I should do that, I would be blushing right now. The reason, the real fact is I never do that. You know, probably the last time I picked up newspaper and really read it from cover to back was when I was 14 or 15.
You're not missing out on much, by the way.
Yeah. So the thing is that, but some people, you know, like some people who truly value being up to date with current affairs and politics, every single day they find the time. They spend the money to buy the different magazines. They read about it, they talk about it, they perhaps invest a lot in reading the books to get a good feedback, a good background around it. So they spend a lot of time on it and energy on it, and they find a certain level of joy in it. Now, the main fact is when we talk about motivation at work, that relates to the same core values. And if you figure out what your top values are, and if your current position is helping you to meet those values, then inevitably you will be motivated, you'll be enthusiastic, you'll be a high achiever. If your top values are not being met at work, and you need to deal with things which are at the bottom of the list, you'll be resentful, you'll be follower, you'll struggle to perform things. You'll have a lot of times in patients, clients who are doing that, I see they say I have ADHD, I have problems with memory, I procrastinate. And a lot of times that's just a consequence of doing the things which are not high on the value list. Now there is two ways about it. There is either A, creating a job or finding a job which is at the top of your value list, or actually taking the current position and asking how this job is helping me to meet my highest values. If at the top of your list is your family, being fit, and what the third thing would be financial stability, asking how this job is helping me to provide for my family, how this job is helping me to pay for the gyms and for healthy foods, right? How this job is helping me to create stability over time and save and invest. So, and for each of those, answer, write at least 30 things how your current position, I would suggest 50 if you can, is helping you. How is it on the way rather than in the way for you to meet those values? And that alone can actually boost the motivation. Now, talking about the procrastination, one component is we are much easier to procrastinate in terms of the things which are not high on our value list. That's one thing. So doing that exercise could help you. So how completing this task would help me with my highest values. And very quick story to share. When I was writing my PhD thesis, believe me, I was procrastinating like you never seen. my friends laughed that Gabija procrastinated for a year and written a thesis in a month, which is not entirely true, but is a bit getting there. But one thing I sat down actually and written at that time, I worked out that what things I truly value was helping people, directly helping people in some substantial way, creating new knowledge in the world, and being connected with people, talking to people. I love giving seminars. I love coaching people. I like that kind of direct contact. And having family, having fulfilling and warm and loving family. Those things were at the top of the list. So I asked myself, how completing my thesis things. I've written down 50 reasons. How would it help me with my coaching business? Which I started, halfway through my PhD. How would that help me with delivering seminars? And now I'm actually, seeing the beautiful fruits of that. But back then I was kind of in the moment, I was like, I just don't want to write this thesis. It's boring and so on. How would it help me to be good mom and be a good example for my children? How would that help me with, like directly helping people best that I can? And I've written 50 benefits. And I didn't procrastinate ever since. But it's very important to write the things which truly resonate with your heart. If you just kind of, slack it off and say blah, 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 see, it doesn't work, it won't work. But if you really put your heart and soul to it, it will make a big shift. Now, there's other reasons why we procrastinate. And that was another component why I procrastinate with my thesis. And there was usually quite many reasons. So one could be the task is too big. It's too overwhelming. So then, breaking the task in small chunks and doing the task using Pomodoro Technique, where you focus on the time rather than results. And for me, it made a big difference writing thesis. I say, okay, today I need to do 4 Pomodoros. And as much as I achieve in each Pomodoro, it doesn't matter. Some days we have more resources, other days less resources. So if we start to focus on something what's in our control, such as how much time I spend sitting in front of a computer and typing, or how much time I spend drawing a painting or whatever, that's in our control. And that reduces procrastination usually. Again, if you had certain traumatic memories, traumatic events related to that certain experience, that might increase procrastination too. So maybe some inner healing is needed. And so this is just to give a starting point. I give a workshop mid-September. I talk in a greater detail, both how for each of us to deal with our procrastination and how to help other people to do that as I work with my clients in that way. Just to summarize, overall, actually, each of us can achieve enormous results, can get things done, but it won't necessarily be in the very same area. In order to achieve high results, we need to do things which are either at the top of our priority list, or which are very strongly linked with our priority list. And if you want to figure out a lot more about it, on the 16th of September, which is Saturday, I do actually have a whole day workshop from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. in London, which is called Neuroscience for Coaches and Business, Changing Self and Productivity. We're discussing great details, both, how to change your habits, how do we perceive the world, how we develop personality, and how can we change ourselves and how we can help others change as coaches or therapists. And I discuss in great detail all the measures of productivity, how to get more things done during the day, how to perform well at the tasks, how to train your attention, your memory, and how to deal with procrastination. And I have an answer. Remember, you asked me about multitasking. So if you want to know the answer to multitasking, come to that workshop as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, certainly you've touched on some great points for sure. And I certainly recommend anybody watching to attend, and you do some great work, and we've worked together in the past, and no doubt we'll carry on doing some work together in the future. So I think that very much. I think that's important. I think having that science base, and science has taken us to so far, and science has got a long way to go. And I think at the moment it's the best we have in terms of understanding. Yeah.
And I think the most important is asking yourself, because I notice for many people who come to my talks or become my clients, for some people it's very, very important not only to know what to do, but to know why, to understand the mechanism deeply behind certain techniques. And that makes much more,
I think so,
much more proactive. So if you are that kind of person, I would really say, strongly recommend you to investigate further into neuroscience, and either you choose to come to my
basic. Well, they can get a basic understanding of it. Goes a long way.
Exactly. Or there is a lot of books out there. I'm currently writing a book as well, which will be out not that soon. And I think neuroscience offers a really, really invaluable input in understanding human behavior. And as a result, knowing that, we can individually make much better choices without needing anybody's advices as such.
No, certainly, I think so. It gives you an understanding, a more in-depth understanding of what's going on, and I think that in itself can help people come to terms with where they are and move forward. And certainly, if we've been in a situation, they get the realization that, okay, going forward. And for me, one of the things that I do when I help people from a coaching or a therapy point of view is I normalize an issue that they have, not condone the issue, but normalize in the sense that, okay, it's a cocktail, a perfect storm of all the different interactions that have led them to where they are. They want to change, you're going to have to make an effort of changing. So, change isn't always easy. The brain likes familiarity. The brain generalizes. If we didn't generalize, we would have to learn everything that we learned yesterday, again today, and in the past. So you've probably seen that film. People watching the interview today, you've probably seen that film, 50 First Dates. I'm not recommending to go and see it, by the way, but here's a woman that loses her short-term memory. As a result of losing her memory, she's got to watch a video of all the things she's done the day before. So she's got to relearn. So we didn't generalize. We'd have to relearn tying our shoelace. We have to relearn to drive a car. We have to relearn to order a sandwich at the shop. So generalizing can be a useful thing, but also generalizing can be a bad thing too, because we generalize experientially that's dangerous, presenting is dangerous, an interview is dangerous, this is going to go wrong based on past experience. So I think to rewrite the wrongs and be more adaptive, certainly having processes in place to do that, it's not always easy. Some people like to think that they can do, and we don't know, we can't really put a time frame on. It's going to take anybody to change, yet it's possible. And I think certainly for me, Gabby, the biggest burnout and I have the privilege of coaching, I have the privilege of living training around the world for therapists and coaches, and I think one of the highest burnout ratios amongst coaches and therapists, they sort of take it upon themselves as being the high, powerful, mighty one. I'm going to make the change for you. I'm going to do it for you. And we know that there's trillions of cells in the brain. If you think you're going to say something to make something change, you've got to think again. We're going to facilitate experiences for people to stimulate realizations. And anyone that thinks that whatever modality they use, be it psychotherapy, be it coaching, be it hypnotherapy, be it psychodramatic techniques, is the catalyst to facilitative change, they're making an epistemic error. Because ultimately, in the end, the person will change experientially to stimulate realizations. And people listen to music to feel better. They watch TV. People watch the Titanic. They know what's going to happen in that film to trigger an emotional response. So I really believe that we can create experiences for people at a deeper level. Then there's more chance of the facilitation of adaptive change. And that's certainly translating to business. I think the why of neuroscience is fundamental to that in designing techniques and strategies that can be concrete evidence that we're going to get that outcome, we're going to go about it that way, in adverse to the willpower. I'm going to do it, and punch the air, and I'm going to go for it. Then a day later, like we know a lot of things that are geared up in society from that point of view, they just fall flat on their face. And that's why statistically, I think a lot of these, not that I'm against these organizations and these groups that are out there, they're quite useful. The stats don't lie. They're not very effective at change because willpower will only go so far, where working at a more unconscious level is far more powerful. And all the neuroscience points towards that, and what stuff that you do and talked about is at a deeper level where we need to strike for change. Now, we've sort of been kind enough to to come on board this morning. I've really enjoyed it. We could speak for hours, really.
Once we start talking,
precisely. No, exactly. No, definitely. And if anyone's getting in touch with you, Gabija, can they get in touch? What's the best way? You do some great work, and you're always on tour. And,
so the best is either to find me on LinkedIn and message me on LinkedIn, or to send me an email. So my email is Dr. Gabija, Gabija .Toleikyte, Toleiky. Oh, actually, no, sorry. That's the old one. Once again, Dr. Gabija at supergcoaching.com. Dr.Gabija, Gabija at supergcoaching.com. So that's my email address, or my name is Gabija Toleikyte. You can find me, Dr. Gabija Toleikyte, on LinkedIn, and message me there. Also, you can visit my website, mybrainduringtheday.com, and there is my contact details there, and there is information about my upcoming seminars there as well. I deliver content each week, and I do whole day workshops every few months as well.
No, definitely. I can't speak highly enough about your work. There is phenomenal work you do, amazing stuff, and I think that I certainly would recommend people get in touch and go from there. Once again, I really want to thank you for coming aboard the show. No doubt we'll get you back on again and cover other areas as well.
And if you could briefly mention, I keep recommending you to my viewers, and I'll share this video with my viewers.
For sure.
If people wanted to get in touch with you about further ideas, which you shared, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, I mean, they can email me directly at Jimmy, Jimmy Petruzzi, Petruzzi at NLP-trainingcourses.com, or on Facebook we're NLP and Mindfulness for Success. Also LinkedIn, Jimmy Petruzzi, as Petruzzi, or they could just Google me and find me somewhere. But yeah, people.
You can email me. I can give Jimmy's contacts to you.
And vice versa, for sure, definitely. But, yeah. Thanks again, Gabija. You've been absolutely awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks again.
As always, thank you.
Have an awesome day.
Yeah. Bye bye, everyone.